Hey, so joining me now is former White House Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor at Bondi Partners, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, thank you so much, as always, for joining us here on the U.S. Report. So much to get through here, but I wanted to first get your reaction to this decision, 5-4 call by the Supreme Court, backing a federal judge's power to order the Trump administration to pay $2 billion to USAID group contractors who were seeking payment for previously completed projects. Now, what do you make of this, and especially some of the criticism of Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who was one of Trump's picks in his first term, who sided with the liberal justices on this one?
Yeah, James, it's a head scratcher. There's no question about that. Look, I used to practice law a long time ago. I've taken a look at the opinion, and I'm not sure what's going on here. There's a bunch of things at play as to whether or not a lower court can tie up the entire nation on something like this. And I got to imagine there's a lot of folks in the Trump team who are very, very disappointed with Amy Coney Barrett in that decision. That's fine. I mean, she's an independent judge, and I get that. But no, this one's going to have reverberations for a long time. Let's hope that there's an opportunity to straighten it out in the coming days. If this decision stands permanently, it's going to make it very, very difficult for future executives to rein in the legislative state.
Yeah, that's right. And just on the subject of DOGE and the Department of Government efficiency, there's also been a report in the last few hours suggesting that Donald Trump is set to rein in Elon Musk and to give higher administration officials a bit more power when it comes to DOGE. He's talking about using a scalpel rather than a hatchet. I'd love to get your reaction to this, and I'm wondering particularly if there's concern about some of the poll numbers they're seeing, that people think some of the cuts are either going too far or hitting in places where they don't need to, or that they're causing some job losses in electorates where they don't want to see that.
Yeah, I think Donald Trump's immune to a lot of that personally. Keep in mind, he's not going to run again. He's term limited as president. He wants to be popular. Everybody does. But I don't think the polls have as big an impact on him as they would, say, on members of the House and the Senate. And my guess is that's part of this, is that Trump is hearing about it from members of the House, from members of the Senate, saying that this is hurting them back home. He's also seeing a lot of negative coverage in the media, even the right of center media, what little that exists in this country, about veterans being laid off. Keep in mind that a lot of veterans will serve in the military. They're still very young when they finish, and they'll go back and work for the government. So those stories don't lend themselves to good press, especially on the right side of the dial. So it's probably a variety of things. I think it's probably less the polls and more the people that are talking to the president and the media coverage he's seeing on television.
Yeah, and of course the media is going to go and find the most sympathetic cases to bring about, and veterans, it doesn't get much more sympathetic than that. Also want to just kick around this whole tariffs delay here. We've had tariffs on Canada and Mexico, and then they're on again, and they're off again, and then automakers are exempt. I'm curious about what you think about the strategy here. Is, you know the man, you've worked with Donald Trump, you know his style. So give us a little bit of a clue here, what's happening, because some of the commentary is saying this is all looking a little bit chaotic, but other people are saying, no, this is just negotiating, keeping opponents off balance. But there's also concern that, this isn't a commercial negotiation. There's diplomacy and other things involved where this may wind up, causing, shall we say, unintended consequences.
Yeah, not that politicians in Washington writ large care much about what they might have said in the past. Generally speaking, there's the attention span of Washington, D.C. is about 30 seconds. But Trump did put out a tweet several years ago that said, I think it was during the Biden administration, may have been during the Obama administration, that if the president is president while the stock market goes down 1,000 points in 2 days, then the president should be impeached. And that's what happened over the last couple of days in the stock market here. So that one has really come back to sort of bite him. And he pays very close attention, James, to the markets. We talked just a minute ago about who he listens to. Does he listen to the polls? Does he listen to media? He pays a lot of attention to the markets. And he uses the stock market sort of a barometer as to whether or not his policies are working. I think that's misplaced. I used to encourage him to not react on the short term to the markets and so forth. But a lot of his friends have lost a lot of money in the last couple of days. And, they're probably calling him to ask him, what the plan is. That being said, there's also just the simple element here that the automobile industry is going to be dramatically impacted. It's definitely going to raise the prices of cars, and Trump doesn't like that either. So look, no one said tariffs are going to be easy. They said it's his favorite word. He loves it, and that may be, but tariff policy is not easy, or else everybody would do it.
Well, yeah, that's true. But, also just to go back to something else Trump said this week in a speech to Congress, because we're talking about tariffs, that's a very 19th century idea. And now he's also talking again about Greenland, which got to mention. Have a listen to this.
And I also have a message tonight for the incredible people of Greenland. We strongly support your right to determine your own future. And if you choose, we welcome you into the United States of America. We need Greenland for national security and even international security.
Mick, in the last few hours, a piece has also dropped in the Wall Street Journal suggesting that there indeed could be some sort of joint condominium pact with Greenland, noting that there is a national interest in Greenland for the United States. Tariffs, the Greenland, the expansionism, are we really seeing a return to 19th century politics, going back to, say, the presidency of William McKinley, who wound up snapping up Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines?
No, I don't think so. By the way, he did then go on to say that, we'd love to have you, and we're going to have you. What you just saw there, you and I have talked about this on the show before, James. What you just saw there was the scripted part, which is we respect your right to make your own decisions. We'd love to work with you. It is in our national interest to do so. The part about how we're going to get you was more ad-libbed than anything else. Look, I don't expect U.S. troops in Greenland. I don't expect U.S. troops in Panama. Do I think he might make Greenland an offer? I mean, look, there's only 50,000 people living on the island. You give every one of them $1 million, that's a lot of money to them. And then, when you're $36 trillion in debt, what's the difference to us? So there's all different ways to get this deal done. Look, everybody in this country knows Greenland is strategically important when it comes to the Arctic. We don't want to see China establish any sort of operations up there. This is a discussion point for a reason. But I think it's hyperbole to think that we'll be invading Greenland anytime soon. This is not the late 19th century.
Fair enough. Mick Mulvaney, thank you so much for joining me as always.